The empire of Persia was a vast tapestry of gold and dust, stretching from the plains of India to the rugged borders of Ethiopia. In the heart of this colossal empire sat Shushan, the citadel of kings, where stone lions guarded the gates, and the air was thick with the scent of cedar and royal decree. King Ahasuerus sat upon the throne of the world, a man of immense power but often blinded by the swirling incense of his own luxury and the whispers of his court. Among those whispers, one voice rose with more persistence than the rest: Haman, the son of Hammedatha, who climbed the social ladder with ruthless precision. Haman wore his ambition like a cloak of heavy purple silk, hiding the sharp, rusted edges of a heart hardened by ancient grudges and a hunger for subservience. The king, in a moment of misplaced trust, elevated Haman above all other princes, commanding that every knee must bend whenever the Agagite passed. Haman walked with the heavy stride of a conqueror, his eyes scanning the crowds for the validation of his own inflated sense of divinity. To a man like Haman, the bowing of 1,000 heads was never enough. He required the absolute, soul-crushing submission of every living being. However, at the king's gate sat a man who did not move, a man of quiet, ironclad dignity and unshakable faith named Mordecai. Mordecai was an exile who carried the weight of Jerusalem's ruins in his eyes and the timeless wisdom of the Torah in his heart. While others hit the dust in a fever of fear, Mordecai remained upright, his spine a pillar of ancient strength and spiritual defiance. Day after day, Haman passed by in his golden chariot, and day after day, Mordecai's posture remained unyielding against the earthly tyranny. The servants of the palace warned Mordecai in hushed tones that he played a dangerous game with a man who held the king's signet ring. Mordecai simply told them that he was a Jew, and his faith forbade him from bowing to any being other than the Almighty Creator. When these words finally reached Haman's ears, the Agagite felt a cold, systemic rage that demanded a sacrifice far greater than just one man's life. Haman thought it beneath his dignity to lay hands on Mordecai alone. Instead, he sought to destroy the entire nation from which this rebel had grown. He consulted sorcerers and cast the sacred lot to determine the most auspicious day for a genocide that would purge his world. The lot fell on the 13th day of the month of Adar, a date Haman marked with a predatory smile that carried the chill of 1,000 graves. With a mask of concern for the state, Haman approached King Ahasuerus, painting the Jews as a threat to the crown's unity. "It is not for the king's profit to tolerate them," Haman whispered, offering 10,000 talents of silver to seal the bloody bargain. The king, distracted by his own greatness, slipped the signet ring from his finger and handed it to Haman, surrendering the kingdom's conscience. Letters were drafted in haste and sent by the swiftest couriers to every dark corner of the 127 provinces. The decree was brutal. On the day of Adar, every citizen was commanded to annihilate all Jews, young and old, and seize their goods. Shushan fell into confusion, divided between the jubilant celebrations of Haman and the terrified families living under the shadow of a ticking clock. Mordecai, hearing the doom of his people, tore his clothes and covered himself in sackcloth and bitter ashes, wailing against the palace walls. Inside those walls lived Queen Esther, Mordecai's ward, who had kept her heritage hidden under the veil of royal protocol. When Esther heard of Mordecai's grief, she sent him raiment, but he refused the comfort, sending back a copy of the decree and a desperate plea. He told her she must go to the king, reminding her that her position was not a shield, for the fire Haman lit would consume even the palace. "Who knows?" Mordecai's message read, "whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this." Esther trembled, for to approach the king uninvited meant instant execution unless he extended the mercy of his golden scepter. But the wisdom of the exile moved her beyond fear, and she called for a fast, preparing her soul to risk everything for her people. Meanwhile, Haman's ego swelled like a storm cloud, fed by his proximity to the throne and the belief that he had outmaneuvered God. He walked the halls feeling like the master architect of history, unaware that the queen was fasting for the destruction of his plans. On the third day, Esther stood in the inner court, her royal robes shimmering with a resolution that surpassed her terror. The king looked up, and instead of anger, he felt a wave of divine affection, extending the golden scepter toward his queen. "What is your request, Queen Esther?" he asked. "It shall be given to you, even if it requires half of this kingdom." Esther, demonstrating tactical patience, invited the king and Haman to a private banquet she had meticulously prepared. Haman went home with a heart bursting with pride, boasting to his wife Zeresh about the unique honor he had achieved. "Even the queen," he bragged, "permitted no one but me to accompany the king to her intimate banquet." Yet as he walked through the gate, his joy was extinguished when he saw Mordecai, still sitting, still silent, and still refusing to bow. The sight of the humble man was a jagged thorn in Haman's side, a blemish on his perfect world that he could no longer tolerate. Zeresh, seeing his murderous frustration, suggested, "Let a gallows be made 50 cubits high, towering over the city. Tomorrow morning, speak to the king that Mordecai may be hanged upon it. Then go in merrily to the banquet." Haman loved the idea. The thought of Mordecai swinging high above Shushan gave him a thrill of perverse anticipation. He ordered the construction to begin immediately, and all through the night, the rhythmic sound of hammers echoed through the streets. Each beam of wood was a testament to his hatred, yet he knew nothing of the divine trap he was setting for his own feet. That same night, sleep fled from King Ahasuerus, as if a restless hand was stirring his spirit and keeping his eyelids open. He commanded that the chronicles, the records of the kingdom, be read aloud to him. By the flickering light of a lamp, the scribe opened to the account of how Mordecai had once uncovered an assassination plot, saving the king's life. "What honor has been done to Mordecai for this act of loyalty?" the king inquired, realizing a great debt had been forgotten. The servants replied that nothing had been done, and at that moment, Haman entered the court to ask for Mordecai's life. The king called Haman in and asked, "What shall be done for the man whom the king delights to honor?" Haman, trapped in his own vanity, thought, "To whom would the king do honor more than to myself?" Believing he was designing his own triumph, Haman described the most lavish ceremony his greedy mind could conceive. "Let the royal apparel and the king's horse be brought, with the royal crown set upon his head," Haman proposed. "Let a noble prince lead him through the city, proclaiming, 'Thus shall it be done to the man the king delights to honor.'" The king nodded and said, "Make haste, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew who sits at the gate." The words hit Haman with the force of a mountain, a total reversal of fortune that left him gasping for air. He was forced to dress his mortal enemy in royal robes and lead the horse, shouting the praises of the man he intended to hang. Through the streets they went, a procession where the oppressor was made the servant of the oppressed. When it was finished, Mordecai returned to the gate in humility, but Haman rushed home, mourning and covering his head in shame. His wife Zeresh offered a grim warning, "If Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, you shall not prevail. You have begun to fall." Before he could process his terror, the king's chamberlains arrived to hurry him to Esther's second banquet. At the banquet, as the wine flowed, the king again turned to Esther and asked for her true petition. Esther spoke with the strength of her ancestors, "If I have found favor, let my life and my people be given me. For we have been sold to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish," she cried, her voice trembling with the weight of her nation. The king was struck by outrage. Who is he that durst presume in his heart to do such a thing against my queen? Esther raised her hand and pointed a steady finger. "The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman." Haman's face turned the color of ash as the king rose in fury and walked into the garden to contemplate the betrayal. In a desperate attempt to save himself, Haman fell upon the couch where Esther was reclining, pleading for a mercy he never showed. The king returned and saw Haman sprawled across the queen's couch, an image that looked like an assault on the royal person. "Will he even force the queen before me in my own house?" the king roared, and attendants immediately covered Haman's face. Harbona, a chamberlain, spoke up, "Behold, the gallows 50 cubits high which Haman built for Mordecai stands in his courtyard." The king's decree was swift. "Hang him thereon," he commanded, ending the reign of the Agagite prince. They took Haman and hanged him on the very gallows he had built with such hatred for the man who refused to bow. The pride that constructed a monument to death became the instrument of its creator's final destruction. Mordecai was brought into the king's presence, receiving the signet ring that had once been the tool of Haman's genocide. Esther was granted the house of Haman, and the decree of death was countered by a new decree allowing the Jews to defend themselves. The day Haman chose for massacre became a day of light, gladness, and joy for a people who survived the shadow. Haman's story is a perennial reminder of the blindness that accompanies absolute self-importance. He spent his life building a legacy of hate only to die by the architecture of his own cruelty. Every nail driven into that wood was a symbol of his obsession with his own image and disregard for others. He believed he was the master of destiny, yet he was a puppet dancing to the tune of his own unexamined vices. Mordecai's refusal to bow was an act of submission to a higher law that no earthly king could rewrite. True power does not reside in titles or wealth, but in the timeless truths we are willing to stand for. Haman saw only subjects to be crushed. Mordecai saw a creator to be honored in every breath. The downfall of Haman was a catastrophic lack of simple, human humility. The wheels of divine justice may turn slowly, but they grind with an accuracy that no man can escape. The purr he cast with such confidence served only to reveal the hidden hand of providence protecting the faithful. Today, we remember Haman as the cautionary tale of the man who dug a pit and fell into it himself. His name is synonymous with the boomeranging nature of evil and the collapse of the tyrant's house. In the silence of the Shushan ruins, the lesson of Haman's gallows still echoes for those with ears to hear. It tells us that whatever we build out of malice will eventually become our own prison, or our own end. Build your life with wisdom and compassion, the only foundations that the fires of judgment cannot topple. Thus ends the account of Haman the Agagite, the man who built a gallows for a hero, but found it was the measure of his own soul. The height of our pride is the exact distance we are destined to fall when the truth comes to light. May we learn to stand upright like Mordecai, even when the world demands we fall to our knees. For in the end, it is not the gallows that define us, but the courage to be a light in the darkest of times. Comment, like, share, and subscribe to Storycraft Studio for more tales of myth, legend, and timeless wisdom.